The mockery begins. The underestimation. Dr. Marcus Webb adjusted his tablet as he entered the main conference hall of Galactic Research Station Epsilon 7. The station floated peacefully in neutral space, serving as a meeting point for 12 different species to collaborate on scientific endeavors. As the only human xenobiologist on board, Marcus had grown accustomed to being the subject of curious stares and whispered conversations. The conference hall buzzed with activity as various alien species mingled before the morning briefing. Marcus noticed Commander Throck, a towering member of the Vorthak species, holding court near the central display. The Vorthak were known throughout the galaxy as fierce warriors, their chitinous exoskeletons and razor-sharp mandibles making them formidable opponents in any conflict. "The humans puzzle me," Throck was saying, his voice carrying the distinctive clicking undertones of his species. "They claim to be warriors, yet look at them. No natural weapons, no protective shells, no venom sacs. How did such soft creatures ever survive their homeworld?" Several alien species had gathered around, their various forms of laughter creating a cacophony of sounds. There was Zilf, a Christek whose diamond-like skin could deflect energy weapons, and Gormax, whose Bruthan heritage gave him strength enough to crush steel with his bare hands. Marcus approached the group, maintaining his professional composure despite the familiar sting of their words. "Good morning, Commander Throck. Discussing comparative biology again?" Throck's compound eyes fixed on Marcus, mandibles clicking in what passed for amusement among his kind. "Ah, Dr. Webb. Perfect timing. We were just marveling at the galactic anomaly that is human physiology. Tell me, how does your species compensate for such obvious physical deficiencies?" "Intelligence and adaptability," Marcus replied calmly, having had this conversation countless times. "We excel at problem-solving and working together as a team." "Intelligence," scoffed Gormax, his massive frame casting a shadow over the human. "Every species claims intelligence. But when predators come hunting, intelligence means nothing if you cannot fight or flee effectively." Marcus smiled slightly. "Perhaps. But we've managed to spread across several star systems despite these supposed limitations." "Technology," Throck dismissed with a wave of his armored appendage. "Any species can learn to push buttons and pilot ships. I speak of natural capability. In a fair fight, without weapons or tools, how would a human fare against a real predator?" The question hung in the air, drawing more attention from nearby conversations. Marcus could feel dozens of alien eyes focusing on him, waiting for his response. He had spent months building relationships with these beings, earning their respect through his work and dedication. Yet here he stood, once again defending his entire species. "You make an interesting assumption, Commander," Marcus said carefully. "You assume we never were predators ourselves." This caused a ripple of what could only be described as alien laughter. Zilpha's crystalline structure chimed melodically while Gormax's deep rumbling suggested genuine amusement. "Predators?" Throck's mandibles spread wide in his species' equivalent of a grin. "Look at yourself, Doctor. Soft skin that tears easily, blunt teeth suitable only for grinding plant matter, weak limbs that lack any meaningful claws or striking surfaces. Your eyes face forward like a hunter's, I'll grant you that, but everything else screams, prey animal." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "I understand your perspective. Most species develop obvious physical advantages. Armor, claws, venom, enhanced strength. It's the most straightforward evolutionary path." "Exactly," Throck said, clearly pleased that the human was finally seeing reason. "So how did your kind survive long enough to develop that intelligence you're so proud of?" "Persistence," Marcus replied simply. "Persistence?" Gormax leaned forward, genuinely curious now. "We didn't need to be the fastest or the strongest," Marcus continued. "We just needed to be the most stubborn. Our ancestors would chase prey for days if necessary. Hours and hours of steady pursuit until the target simply collapsed from exhaustion. Throck's mandibles clicked dismissively. Persistence hunting is hardly unique. Many species employ similar tactics. True, Marcus agreed. But we refined it. We learned to work in coordinated groups, to track wounded animals across vast distances, to use tools to extend our capabilities. And most importantly, we learned to adapt our strategies based on what we encountered. The gathered aliens exchanged glances that suggested they found this explanation insufficient. Marcus could see the skepticism in their various forms of body language. With respect, Doctor, Throck said, his tone suggesting anything but respect, what you describe sounds like the behavior of scavengers, not apex predators. Following wounded animals, using tools because you lack natural weapons, adapting because you cannot simply overpower your opposition. Marcus felt a familiar fire building in his chest. He had dedicated his career to fostering understanding between species, to building bridges across the vast differences that separated them. But sometimes, diplomacy wasn't enough. Perhaps, he said quietly, you would be interested in a practical demonstration. The alien chatter died instantly. Throck's compound eyes narrowed, and Marcus could feel the weight of every gaze in the hall focusing on him. What exactly are you proposing, Doctor? Throck asked, his voice carrying a dangerous edge. Marcus met the alien commander's gaze steadily. A simple test. No weapons, no tools, no technology. Just natural capabilities. If humans are as weak as you believe, it should be easy enough to prove. The silence stretched for long moments before Throck's mandibles began clicking rapidly, a sign of excitement among his kind. Interesting, the Vorthak commander said slowly. Very interesting indeed. Part 2, the challenge issued. The gauntlet thrown. Captain James Mitchell strode through the corridors of Epsilon 7 with the measured pace of a career military officer. Word of Dr. Webb's impromptu challenge had spread through the station faster than a plasma leak, and as the senior human military advisor aboard, James knew he'd be called upon to either support or contain the situation. The command center buzzed with activity when he arrived. General Krekstar dominated the central planning table, his reptilian form towering over the holographic display. The Zephyrian scales shifted from deep green to amber, a sign of intense concentration among his species. Captain Mitchell, Krekstar's voice rumbled like distant thunder. Your Dr. Webb has created quite the stir. The scientific community is buzzing with speculation about this proposed demonstration. James nodded respectfully. The Zephyrians were an ancient warrior culture, their military prowess legendary throughout the galaxy. Krekstar himself bore the ritual scars of a dozen campaigns, each mark representing a conquered world or defeated enemy. General, I understand there's been some discussion about human combat capabilities, James said diplomatically. I'm here to ensure any misunderstandings are resolved peacefully. Krekstar's inner eyelids flickered, the Zephyrian equivalent of raised eyebrows. Misunderstandings? Captain, your colleague has essentially challenged the fundamental assumptions about human physiology that we've held for centuries. This is no mere academic debate. Around the command center, representatives from various species had gathered. James recognized Ambassador Yexnoth of the Hegemony, her tentacled form undulating slowly as she processed the situation. The crystalline being Trilek stood nearby, light refracting through his transparent body in patterns that indicated deep contemplation. The proposal is simple, General Krekstar continued, gesturing to the holographic display. A controlled combat scenario in the station's training facility. One human volunteer against opponents from 3 different species, each representing a distinct evolutionary advantage. James studied the display, his expression carefully neutral. And the rules of engagement? No weapons, no technological assistance, no chemical enhancements, Krekstar replied. Pure biological capability. The human will face a Vorthak warrior for speed and natural weaponry, a Bruthan fighter for strength and endurance, and a Nexari scout for agility and sensory enhancement. That hardly seems fair, James observed. 3 against 1? Krekstar's scales shifted to a deeper amber. Not simultaneously, Captain. 3 separate encounters, each designed to test a different aspect of combat capability. Your Dr. Webb was quite specific about wanting to demonstrate human adaptability. Ambassador Yexnatha's tentacles writhed in what James recognized as diplomatic concern. Captain Mitchell, while we appreciate the scientific value of such a demonstration, we must consider the potential for injury. The species involved are all naturally equipped for combat in ways that humans simply are not. James felt a familiar weight settling on his shoulders. Throughout his career, he'd watched human soldiers prove themselves time and again against overwhelming odds, but always with the benefit of training, equipment, and tactics. This would be different, a test of pure biological capability. Who would represent humanity in these encounters? He asked. The choice is yours, Krekstar replied. Though I assume you'll want someone with military training. The scientific staff, while admirable in their dedication, lack the practical experience for such an undertaking. James nodded slowly. His mind was already running through the limited roster of human military personnel aboard the station. There were only 4 of them: himself, Lieutenant Sophia Reeves from Special Forces, Sergeant Ben Torres from Combat Engineering, and Corporal Lisa Hayes from Communications. I need to consult with my team, James said. This isn't a decision to make lightly. Of course, Krekstar agreed. But be aware that word of this challenge has already reached the civilian sectors. There's considerable interest in seeing whether human claims about adaptability and persistence hold up under pressure. Trilek stepped forward, his crystalline form chiming softly as he moved. Captain, my species has observed human military operations for 3 centuries. We've always been puzzled by your tactics, seeming to favor indirect approaches over direct confrontation. Perhaps this demonstration will provide insight into your strategic thinking. James felt the weight of expectation from every being in the room. This wasn't just about proving human capability, it was about validating their place in the galactic community. For too long, humans had been seen as the soft species, the ones who relied on technology and cunning rather than natural strength. General Krekstar, what assurances can you provide regarding safety protocols? James asked. Full medical teams standing by, including specialists familiar with human physiology, the Zephyrian replied. The encounters will be monitored by our most advanced sensors, and any participant can yield at any time without prejudice. Ambassador Yexnatha's tentacles formed complex patterns as she spoke. Captain, I must express my species' concern about this endeavor. The tentacled collective has long valued diplomatic solutions over martial ones. We fear this demonstration may promote a more confrontational approach to interspecies relations. James understood her concern. The delicate balance of galactic politics required careful navigation, and a public display of human combat capability could be interpreted in many ways. Ambassador, I appreciate your position, he replied. But sometimes understanding requires demonstration. If our allies believe we're inherently weak, how can they trust us to stand beside them when challenges arise? Krekstar's scales shifted to a brilliant gold, a sign of approval among Zephyrians. Well spoken, Captain. Strength recognized builds stronger alliances than strength assumed. The holographic display updated, showing detailed specifications for the training facility. The space could be configured for various combat scenarios, with adjustable gravity, atmospheric composition, and environmental factors. When would this demonstration take place? James asked. 3 days hence, Krekstar replied. Enough time for preparation and proper documentation. The Galactic Science Consortium has expressed interest in recording the proceedings for future study. James felt his chest tighten. 3 days to prepare for what could either validate human capabilities or confirm every stereotype about their weakness. The pressure would be immense, not just on whoever volunteered to participate, but on the entire human presence aboard the station. I'll need access to personnel files and training records, he said finally. And I want to speak with each potential volunteer personally before making any decisions. Granted, Krekstar nodded. Though I should mention that Commander Throck has been quite vocal about his confidence in the outcome. He's already begun making predictions about how quickly each encounter will conclude. James smiled grimly. Has he now? That's interesting. As the meeting dispersed, James lingered near the holographic display, studying the combat scenarios that had been proposed. Each one was designed to highlight areas where humans appeared weakest compared to other species. Speed against the Vorthak, strength against the Bruthan, agility against the Nexari. But as he examined the details, James began to see something else: opportunities. The scenarios were based on assumptions about human limitations that ignored certain advantages. The question was whether any of his people could recognize and exploit those advantages under pressure. Captain? Ambassador Yexnoth approached, her tentacles moving in subtle patterns of concern. May I speak candidly? Of course, Ambassador. My species has studied human military history extensively. We've noticed a pattern in your conflicts: you rarely win through superior force, but you almost never lose through superior strategy. Perhaps this demonstration is an opportunity to showcase that distinction. James met her gaze, noting the intelligence that lurked behind her alien features. What are you suggesting? That you choose your representative not for their physical prowess, but for their ability to think beyond the obvious parameters of engagement. Sometimes the greatest strength lies in seeing what others overlook. As James left the command center, her words echoed in his mind. The next 3 days would determine not just the outcome of a simple demonstration, but potentially the future of human standing in the galactic community. Part 3: Preparation and Doubt. The Weight of Expectation. Lieutenant Sophia Reeves completed her morning combat drills in the station's auxiliary gymnasium, sweat beading on her forehead despite the controlled atmosphere. The past 24 hours had been a whirlwind of speculation, preparation, and growing pressure as word of the upcoming demonstration spread throughout Epsilon 7. She toweled off and checked her chronometer. Captain Mitchell had scheduled individual meetings with each potential volunteer, and hers was in 10 minutes. As she made her way through the corridors, Sophia couldn't help but notice the way conversations stopped when she passed, followed by hushed whispers in dozens of alien languages. The observation lounge adjacent to the command center had been converted into a temporary meeting space. Sophia found Captain Mitchell reviewing data tablets while Dr. Yilnath, a member of the Peaceful Crystalline Collective, sat nearby. The doctor's translucent form refracted the room's lighting into beautiful patterns, but Sophia could sense the underlying tension in his movements. Lieutenant Reeves, Mitchell looked up from his tablets. Thank you for coming. I assume you're aware of the situation we're facing. Yes, sir. The entire station's talking about it. Sophia took a seat across from him. 3 combat scenarios, no weapons, no tech. Prove that humans aren't as soft as everyone thinks we are. Dr. Yilnath's form chimed softly as he spoke. Lieutenant, I hope you understand that this demonstration carries implications far beyond simple physical capability. The Crystalline Collective has observed increasing tensions between various species regarding humanity's role in galactic affairs. Sophia nodded. She'd been aboard Epsilon 7 for 8 months, long enough to understand the complex political undercurrents that flowed through the station. Humans were still relatively new to the galactic community, and their rapid expansion had created both opportunities and concerns. Dr. Yilnath raises an important point, Mitchell continued. This isn't just about proving we can fight. It's about demonstrating that we belong among the galactic powers, that we're not just clever scavengers who got lucky with technology. Sir, with respect, I've reviewed the proposed scenarios. Sophia's tone was carefully measured. They're designed to highlight every area where humans appear weakest compared to our opponents. Speed versus the Vorthak, strength versus the Bruthan, agility versus the Nexari. It feels like a setup. Mitchell's expression darkened slightly. That thought had occurred to me. But backing down now would confirm every stereotype about human cowardice. We're committed to this path. Dr. Yilnatha's crystalline structure shifted, creating new patterns of light. Perhaps that is precisely why you should reconsider the fundamental approach. My species evolved beyond physical conflict eons ago, but we remember the lessons of our martial past. The greatest victories often come from changing the nature of the contest itself. Sophia leaned forward, intrigued. What do you mean? The scenarios assume direct confrontation, the crystalline doctor explained. Vorthak versus human in a test of speed, Bruthan versus human in a test of strength. But combat is rarely so simple. Perhaps the key lies not in matching their strengths, but in forcing them to adapt to yours. Mitchell set down his tablet. Go on. Humans excel at pattern recognition, strategic thinking, and most importantly, persistence. Your species doesn't simply fight, it problem solves in real time. The question is whether your representative can demonstrate these capabilities under pressure. Sophia felt a chill run down her spine. She'd volunteered for special forces because she thrived on impossible challenges, but this felt different. The weight of representing her entire species in front of dozens of alien observers was unlike anything she'd faced before. Lieutenant, Mitchell's voice brought her back to the present. I need to know if you're prepared for this. Not just physically, but mentally. The entire galactic community will be watching. Sophia took a deep breath. Sir, I've spent my career preparing for situations where the odds were stacked against me. The principle is the same, even if the stakes are higher. The principle, perhaps, but not the execution, Dr. Yilnath interjected gently. Lieutenant, may I ask what you know about persistence hunting? The basics. Pre-technological humans would chase prey animals until they collapsed from exhaustion. Dr. Webb mentioned it during his conversation with Commander Throck. Indeed. But do you understand why it worked? The crystalline being's form brightened slightly. It wasn't simply about outlasting the prey. It was about forcing the prey to operate outside its optimal parameters. A swift antelope could easily outrun a human in a sprint, but humans could maintain pursuit when the antelope needed to rest. Sophia began to see where this was leading. You're suggesting I don't try to match their natural advantages directly. Precisely. Force them to adapt to extended engagement rather than brief displays of superiority. Make them work outside their comfort zones. Mitchell nodded slowly. It's an interesting approach, but risky. The observers expect to see clear demonstrations of capability. If you appear to be avoiding direct confrontation, it could be interpreted as weakness. Or it could be interpreted as intelligence, Dr. Yilnath countered. My species has observed human military tactics for centuries. You rarely win through brute force, but you consistently prevail through superior adaptability and strategic thinking. Sophia stood and began pacing, her mind racing through possibilities. The training facility could be configured for various environments and conditions. If she could influence those parameters, perhaps she could create scenarios that favored human advantages over alien ones. What kind of preparation time do we have? She asked. 2 days, Mitchell replied. The facility will be available for training sessions, and Dr. Yilnath has volunteered to assist with physiological analysis of your opponents. Lieutenant, the crystalline doctor added, I should mention that there has been considerable wagering among the station's civilian population regarding the outcomes. The odds are not in your favor. Sophia couldn't help but smile grimly. Underdog status. I can work with that. Mitchell leaned back in his chair. Sophia, I need you to understand something. If you volunteer for this, you'll be carrying the hopes and reputation of every human in the galaxy. That's a hell of a burden. It is, she agreed. But someone has to carry it. And I'd rather it be someone who understands what's at stake. Dr. Yilnatha's form pulsed with what Sophia had learned indicated approval among his species. There is wisdom in accepting responsibility, Lieutenant. But remember that true strength often lies not in proving you can do what others do, but in proving you can do what others cannot. As the meeting concluded, Sophia felt the weight of decision settling on her shoulders. 2 days to prepare for the most important demonstration of her life, with the entire galaxy watching. The logical part of her mind catalogued the risks and challenges ahead, but beneath that, a familiar fire was beginning to burn. She'd spent her entire career being underestimated because of her size, her gender, and now her species. But every time, she'd found a way to turn those perceived weaknesses into advantages. This would be no different. As she left the meeting room, Sophia heard Dr. Yilnath speaking quietly to Captain Mitchell. "Your lieutenant has the right mindset, Captain. But mindset alone will not be sufficient. She will need to discover something about human nature that even humans have forgotten." Sophia paused in the corridor, those words echoing in her mind. Something about human nature that even humans had forgotten. What could that possibly mean? She had 2 days to find out. Part 4, The Demonstration. When Prey Becomes Predator. Sergeant Ben Torres stood at the entrance to the training facility, his hands steady despite the magnitude of what lay ahead. The decision had been made the previous evening. Lieutenant Reeves would handle the strategic scenarios, but the first demonstration required someone with a different skill set. As a combat engineer, Ben understood the value of turning environmental factors into weapons. The observation deck above the training floor was packed with representatives from 12 different species. Commander Throck held a position of honor at the center, his mandibles clicking with anticipation. General Krekstar stood nearby, his scales shifting through various colors as he processed the proceedings. Dr. Yilnath's crystalline form chimed softly as he approached Ben. "Sergeant, remember what we discussed during preparation. The key is not to match their strengths, but to force them to operate in your optimal range." Ben nodded, his eyes fixed on the training floor below. The first scenario had been configured as a pursuit course, a maze of corridors and chambers designed to test speed and agility. His opponent was Zextai, a Vorthak warrior whose species held the galactic record for short-distance sprinting. "Ladies, gentlemen, and beings of various biological classifications," General Krekstar's voice boomed through the facility's communication system. "Today we witness a demonstration of comparative biological capability. Sergeant Torres of Earth will face 3 challenges designed to test the fundamental assumptions about human physical limitations." Ben stepped onto the training floor, immediately feeling the weight of dozens of alien gazes. Zextai emerged from the opposite entrance, his chitinous exoskeleton gleaming under the facility's lights. The Vorthak warrior stood nearly 7 feet tall, his 4 arms ending in razor-sharp claws that could slice through steel. "The rules are simple," Krekstar continued. "A pursuit scenario through the configured maze. The objective is to reach the central chamber and activate the completion beacon. No weapons, no tools, no assistance." Commander Throck's voice carried clearly from the observation deck. "Note the obvious disparity in physical capability. The Vorthak warrior possesses natural speed nearly 3 times that of the average human, along with superior sensory apparatus and natural weapons for clearing obstacles." Ben flexed his hands, feeling the familiar calm that preceded intense action. During preparation, Dr. Yilnath had shared fascinating insights about Vorthak physiology. Their speed came at a cost. They required frequent rest periods to prevent overheating, and their larger frames consumed energy at an accelerated rate. "Begin," Krekstar announced. Zextai exploded into motion, his 4 limbs carrying him through the maze entrance with incredible velocity. Ben started after him at what appeared to be a casual jog, drawing murmurs of confusion from the observation deck. "Interesting tactic," Ben heard Ambassador Yexnoth comment. "The human appears to be conserving energy rather than attempting to match his opponent's initial burst of speed." Ben smiled grimly as he navigated the first series of corridors. The maze had been designed with multiple routes to the center, some requiring pure speed, others demanding different approaches. Zextai had predictably chosen the most direct path, relying on his natural advantages to overcome any obstacles. But Ben had spent 2 days studying the maze configuration, identifying choke points and alternative routes that played to different strengths. As he reached the first major intersection, he could hear Zextai's claws scraping against metal walls somewhere ahead. The Vorthak was moving so fast that precise navigation was becoming difficult. Ben chose a longer route that avoided the narrow passages where Zextai's larger frame would be advantageous. Instead, he opted for sections that required sustained movement over extended distances. His steady pace began to pay dividends as he maintained consistent progress while his opponent was forced to slow down to navigate tight corners. The first checkpoint arrived sooner than expected. Ben could see Zextai through a transparent section of wall, the Vorthak warrior pausing to catch his breath. The alien's chitinous plates were darkening, a sign of overheating among his species. Fascinating, Dr. Yilnatha's voice carried from above. The human has closed a significant portion of the initial distance gap while maintaining energy reserves. Ben pressed his advantage, maintaining his steady pace as Zextai resumed his sprint. But now the Vorthak's movement was slightly less coordinated, his energy expenditure beginning to take its toll. The maze's designers had assumed the faster competitor would reach the center first, but they hadn't accounted for the tortoise-and-hare dynamic that was developing. As they approached the maze's final section, Ben could see his opponent clearly for the first time since the start. Zextai's forearms were moving less fluidly, and his breathing had become labored. The Vorthak warrior was still faster in short bursts, but his sustainable pace had dropped significantly. The final approach to the central chamber required navigating a series of ascending platforms, a section that demanded both agility and endurance. Zextai reached it first, but his movements were becoming increasingly erratic as fatigue set in. Ben arrived at the platform section just as his opponent stumbled, the Vorthak's overheated system finally rebelling against the sustained exertion. Zextai recovered quickly, but the momentary lapse allowed Ben to close the final gap. They reached the central chamber simultaneously, both lunging for the completion beacon. But Ben's steady energy management throughout the course gave him the final advantage. While Zextai's systems were operating in crisis mode, the humans still had reserves to draw upon. Ben's hand struck the beacon a fraction of a second before his opponent's, the facility's sensors registering a human victory. The observation deck fell silent for a long moment before erupting into a cacophony of alien discussions. Commander Throck's mandibles had stopped clicking entirely, while General Krekstar's scales cycled through colors Ben had never seen before. Remarkable, Dr. Yilnatha's voice carried clearly through the noise. The human demonstrated classic persistence hunting behavior, forcing his opponent to operate outside optimal parameters until biological limitations created an opening. Ben stood in the central chamber, breathing hard but not exhausted, as Zextai collapsed beside the beacon. The Vorthak warrior's chitinous plates were dark with overheating, and his forearms trembled with fatigue. "I did not expect this outcome," Zextai managed between labored breaths. "Your species is more formidable than our intelligence suggested." Ben offered his hand to help the alien warrior to his feet. "Different doesn't mean inferior, friend. Just means we approach problems differently." As they made their way back to the facility entrance, Ben could hear the animated discussions continuing on the observation deck. The first demonstration had accomplished something unexpected. It had forced the alien observers to reconsider their assumptions about human limitations. But this was only the beginning. 2 more challenges awaited, and Ben knew that his opponents would be adapting their strategies based on what they'd just witnessed. The element of surprise was gone, but perhaps something more valuable had been gained in its place: respect. Commander Throck's voice carried down from the observation deck. "It appears we may have underestimated the tactical implications of human persistence. The remaining demonstrations should prove enlightening." Ben smiled as he exited the training floor. Enlightening indeed.